Hey everyone, my name's Brendan. I hope your day's been going good, because mine has been quite the kerfuddlement. Have you ever just had that moment where you're sitting alone in your basement at 4 AM playing Sonic 3D Blast, and all of a sudden you just have an epiphany, and now you're like, wow, I kinda wanna do things differently than the way I have been. I think I need a little bit of a change of pace, but you've been doing things the same way for so long that you're not sure if it's the right option, or if it even be a good idea, so you just keep brainstorming these ideas over and over again. Maybe you'll analyze niche games, maybe you'll say the analysis and crack a few jokes and eggs onto some random stuff. Maybe you'll just shit your pants over Bubsy. Hell, maybe you'll just become the Eric Andre show in 25 minutes. Yes! Maybe you'll try and find a mix between the two for over 2 years, but can't seem to feel quite original doing it. Or maybe one day you'll just get hit in the head by a Model 1 Sega Genesis and say, it's about time we did this, damn it! Yeah, so what better way to go about doing this than looking back on some games I played in the past. I have a lot of nostalgia for a lot of different games. We've discussed this already, and there are a lot I still want to talk about at some point. The game that made me a gamer, the game that made me realize what games and video game music could be. Oh god, it's gotta give me some Persona vibe. The game that shaped my childhood, and the game that literally changed my fucking life. If we're gonna be starting on a little bit of a fresh base here though, I want to think on a slightly smaller scale than that. By talking about a console and game library I have no nostalgia for. Yeah, so I was never exactly a Sega kid growing up. I'll f*** around with Pikmin all day, but when it comes to Jet Set Radio, well, that's where I draw the line. The Sega Saturn is an urban legend. It never existed. You can't convince me otherwise. It's not real. It's not real. It's not real. You can't prove anything. The only games from Sega's library I have any large nostalgia for are Sonic Adventure 2 and Super Monkey Ball 2, and that's just because me and some other lads had a one-night stand on a preschool daycare's GameCube. I don't care if they got Just Dance playing on the Wii up on the stage. Did you see the monkey? Brendan, I hear you saying from across the lecture hall. Hey, what's up? What the hell does this have to do with anything? Well, my friend, it just so happens to do with everything, because despite not growing up with any sort of Sega or Sonic game for the vast majority of my childhood, I would still get hooked on the Blue Blur's classic games over a decade later. I would end up being reintroduced to this franchise years after my last time even touching something from the series. I was hanging out with the boys. And one of them suggested we play the Sonic Mania multiplayer. I hadn't touched a Sonic game in years, but he said it was really good, so I'll take his word for it. So we sat down, played a few rounds, and I didn't like it that much. It had nothing to do with the game itself. Mania is one of, if not the greatest 2D platformer I've ever played. Even a year later when I would play the game on my own in 2019 though, I wouldn't get past Hydro-Sidey Zone. F you, I'm not saying it either of the ways. This was 100% a me issue, but what was it about this game that I just couldn't seem to enjoy? And then one day, it hit me. It was because I didn't fully grasp the gameplay loop that the 2D Sonic games had. You're supposed to work your way through these tougher platforming challenges with speed as the reward, but I thought it was just supposed to be, you just gotta get from over here and over there, okay, got it? Now go! But that's not how it's supposed to work! The game isn't about mindlessly speeding through a level. If I wanted to do that, I'd just play Sonic Forces. It was about how good it felt controlling Sonic through these levels, bopping on enemies, rolling around in a ball, and when you started to memorize these level layouts, how good it felt to move through them at high speeds, collecting rings and going through ramps, half-pipes, boosts along the way. It rewarded skill with speed, and it felt amazing to play. I finally got Sonic Mania and the appeal of classic Sonic as a whole. My love for this game only grew the more I played it, and as Sonic Mania is supposed to be a celebration of the classic Sonic games, I eventually wanted to see where the series got its start. I'd first played the classic Sonic trilogy, then Knuckles, through the Sonic Mega Collection on the GameCube, but I never actually finished any of the games. It wasn't until I picked up an old CRT TV at a garage sale and a Model 1 Sega Genesis at a retro game store that I would actually see them through to the end. And can I just say, God, I'm so happy that this is the way I decided to play them. You might not think it, but playing older games on the hardware they were originally designed for like this is a pretty unique experience. I think the easiest example to point to is the graphics. Developers at this time knew that their games would be displayed on televisions like this, so the pixel art graphics were designed to take advantage of them. On a normal monitor or display, the artwork might still look good, but it's not until that filter goes over it that you see how it was intended to be viewed. Why does Gil look so sad? He looks so sad. What did they do to Gil? Guile, what did it... Why does he look like that? He looked like he had a lazy eye and like he just shit his pants and his girlfriend watched him do it, so now he's embarrassed. He's like, oh no. And it looks like I'm playing Gil. Okay. You insist, game, I guess so. Pixels blend together and images with sharp edges become more rounded out. When people say that these older games look better on a display like this is what they mean. Not to mention that there's really no input delay playing on a TV like this, so controlling a character is as smooth as Ivan's bald head chugging some whiskey. For me personally, that, well, not like this, but like this, combined with my dumb collector brain being able to own the physical cartridges for these games, and the gameplay loop of Sonic being so damn fun, made this one of the coolest and most memorable experiences with any set of games I've ever had. So today, we'll be playing through all of the classic Sonic Genesis games on original hardware, spin-offs included. Keep in mind though that I'm only going to be playing through the games that can be played on a standard Sega Genesis. This is going to mean no Sonic CD or Knuckles Chaotix, because I currently don't own a Sega CD or 32X add-on, and I also don't money. We've held up this hold up for long enough, so let's hold up and play the game. It's time for me to become the game talker I've always dreamed of. Let's roll out! Alright, so most of you probably know this already, but the actual creation of Sonic has a bit of a history to it. Sega didn't just wake up one morning and we're like, yeah, we're gonna create one of the most iconic video game mascots of all time. You. No, there's like a two-step plan there, at least. 3 if we're feeling a little bit crazy, but at least 2! Prior to Sonic's creation, Sega had their console, the Sega Master System, and subsequently their then mascot, Alex Kidd. Calling Alex Kidd their mascot, though, was like calling Hey Pikmin the real Pikmin 4. You can keep telling yourself that, but it's never gonna do you any favors in therapy. For someone as obsessed with plants as you are, you sure love to never go outside. That's just how we gamers roll! Sega also just didn't think very highly of their own characters back then, or value the marketability they might have prior to Sonic. They'd just use them for a game, pat them on the head, then throw them into a dumpster, onto the next one. Sega eventually had to get their act together though, and think of a new marketing scheme to turn things around, especially with their new system coming out, the Sega Mega Drive. Or Sega Genesis if you're one of those stinky North Americans. Oh come on, I don't even smell that bad. The Master System didn't really sell all too well. Outside of Brazil, it's still being sold there to this day. And on top of that, there was a new top dog in the video game industry. Nintendo had pretty much single-handedly saved the video game industry as we know it, created a global phenomenon in both game and console form, and set the quality standard for games as a whole. These guys were practically untouchable at this time. But that wasn't gonna stop Sega from rubbing their white-gloved hands together to concoct a scheme. Sega took a look at what Nintendo had going on here and were like, Italian. So they knew they were gonna need something to compete with good old Soupy Marlboro here and got to work on a new mascot. To make a long story short, a character design contest was held within the company, and over 200 designs would be narrowed down to just a few, one of them being Mr. Needlemouse, designed by Naoto Oshima. Oshima would then bring the most popular designs with him on a trip to New York, where he asked the good people of Central Park which ones they liked the best. We poured blueberries all over the f***ing rats. Cyan Mouse and the Rough Rider ended up being the favorites amongst the public, and would end up being used as the basis for Sonic and Dr. Robotnik respectively. I've got the gamer, now I just need the video game, said Oshima probably. Well, it just so happened that one of the developers at Sega, Yuji Naka, would be just the man to go to. Oshima originally thought of this Hedgehog character design since he liked the idea of a game where the main character curls into a ball to roll around and attack enemies. This, along with Naka's desire to create a high-speed based platformer, would lead to the creation of Sonic the Hedgehog. Opening up the game, and you can just tell that this guy is not someone your mother would approve of, let me tell you that much. How did he get blue? Was it an experiment? An accident? You fall into that vat of eels with Jamie Foxx! Just looking at Sonic, and you can immediately tell that Sega had struck gold with this character. Mario's just a dude from the Bronx. Actually, I think it's more like Brooklyn. He's got a stash, he's got a plunger, and he's got an electric bill to pay, so start breaking your shit so we can start making some dough. Sonic, on the other hand, he's got spunk, he's got personality, the man's got some attitude to him. He's shaking his finger at you like an overprotective parent while you're on your first date.
Alright, you crazy kids, don't do anything I wouldn't do. So make sure to keep your hands to yourselves. Make sure to keep the door cracked open a little bit, kiddo. Yeah! Don't have too much fun now. Or else!
Apparently Sonic's personality may have also been based a little bit on then presidential candidate Bill Clinton. That's fun.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Sonic was a phenomenon, not just as a game, but as a character. Combined with Sega's new ad campaign and bundling the game in with the Genesis, for the first time, Nintendo had started losing their grip on the American console market. But I'm not here to sit and read off a Wikipedia article about these games for the next 30 minutes. I'm here to play these games like an old coot and talk about them. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Plus, while I'm playing the games and talking today, I'm gonna be trying to refine my footing and see how the hell I want to go about doing this kind of stuff in the future. Sonic was created to be something different, something to make Sega stand out from competitors in a good way. And now I'm here trying to figure out a way of talking about games in a way that feels the most me and unique.
I guess you could say that it's almost like poetry. Yes, it's like poetry that I decided to talk about these games today then.
I fucking hate poetry. Sonic 1. Alright, I've got the CRT and Genesis plugged in and ready to go. Hold on, son of a bitch. Hold on, I need to fix the screen. So my TV has this fun little quirk of only having an RF port on it, meaning that getting good quality of my TV can be kind of annoying sometimes. It still looks really good when everything works right, don't get me wrong. But every once in a while, if the connection between the Genesis and the CRT gets too loose, then my screen will start contracting the fuzz and get all wavy. Like a corrupt Pringle. Although I found that if I put something underneath the wire tightly enough, then it won't get screwed up as often, so Home Alone 2 is gonna be coming in clutch once again. My main man, Kevin McAllister, you're killing it out here!
Keep the change, you filthy animal.
Although sometimes if I leave the TV on for too long, it smells funny, so I think it's gonna explode one of these days. Moving into the first zone of the game, and look how pretty this place is! Ignoring my shitty footage quality aside, they don't call this place Green Hill Zone for nothing. I wish I could live here, but I don't need to.
Because I have here.
If there is any level in this game that shows the potential and fun behind a Sonic the Hedgehog game, it's this one. And you know, that's kind of a good thing considering how it's the act you're opening the game with. This is going to be a lot of people's first impression to Sonic as a whole, so if you open your game with, oh, I don't know, slowly pushing blocks or stress-inducing underwater sections, that would just be crazy to have in your speed-based platformer, right? We'll get to you chumps later. Plus, if you're playing this on a CRT like I am, like I mentioned earlier, the game just looks so nice. I think one of my favorite examples to show off stuff like this are waterfalls, since the pixels blend so well together on the CRT compared to standard screens. Although, recording a CRT screen is a bit of a bitch in of itself, and if you don't play around with your camera settings or lower the shutter speed to match the TV screen, for me that was a speed of like 60, then instead of looking like this on your camera, it's gonna look like this. That's also one of the reasons that the screen might also look way too bright at times, which I apologize for. I can't mess around with the brightness settings without the shutter speed also changing accordingly, so this is kind of the best I was able to get. That aside, Green Hill is 3 great acts of running through loops, bopping on robots, and gaining momentum as a reward for getting through platforming challenges. One thing I love about 2D Sonic levels in general, not just in this game, is how there's always alternate paths to take. Some of them might be a bit tougher, some might be a bit easier, others might have some different scenery, obstacles, power-ups, secrets. Despite being a game with a focus on speed, it still manages to encourage exploration and do it really well at that. At least in the good zones. I also love this game's main collectible as well, rings. In Mario, you're jumping around, collecting coins, getting 1-ups. Who gives a shit? I don't think I've ever met a single person who found a hidden area and were like, what? Coin? In Sonic though, these rings are your lifeline. If you've been collecting them and accidentally take damage, you'll have time to rebound and collect some of the ones that were scattered all over the floor. If you get hit without any rings on you though, you're phasing through the floor, baby. You're out of here. I actually care about collecting these things, and it's fun to collect them because there's an actual reason for it, Soupy! Plus, if you reach the end of Act 1 or 2 with 50 rings, then your ass can play the special stage.
What the f were in those yellow donuts?
So, I'm probably alone in this, but I actually really enjoy these special stages. They're trippy, they're disorienting. This is probably what the Beatles saw when they made half their music. Look, I get it. I thought the same thing at first. Once I got used to how it controlled, though, I actually started kind of enjoying it. Plus, these stages are a great way to farm continues if you're struggling to get through the game. Beating one of these drug trips rewards you with one of this game's main MacGuffins, a Chaos Emerald. And let me tell you right now, don't go for these. Just ignore them. They don't exist. They're not real. They're not real. The Saturn wasn't real. The Sega Saturn never existed. What do you guys mean? When did it come out? The rewards for collecting them all get better with preceding Sonic games, but here, the only thing you get are some flowers in the ending cutscene. I get that they're here for replayability, but they aren't really worth going for unless you really want to. Getting back to the main zones though, Green Hill Zone. Overall, really fun. Then there's a Marble Zone. I don't know how Michelangelo could tell her making a whole statue out of this stuff. I can barely stomach it for one act. I'm sure you've already heard people go on rants about this zone dozens of times before. But I don't care, it's my turn. Marble Zone is the complete antithesis of Green Hill. If Green Hill is a walk in the park, then Marble Zone is a walk in the park, but you get jumped by old people. It's not only unfun, but it's embarrassing. In Green Hill, yeah, it's not all speed all the time, and it shouldn't be, but based on the level design alone, you can just tell when it's a speed section and when it's time to slow down and do some more tricky platforming. In Marble Zone though, it's a guessing game as to whether you should be going slow or the rare occasion it gives you a little bit of time to go faster. So my advice is, don't guess, just go slow. It still has a couple short alternate paths to go down and some secrets to find, and the lava looks nice on the CRT screen at least, but aside from that, this zone isn't anything to get excited over. It's boring, it's tedious, it's Marble Zone. These first two zones are important when looking at Sonic level design, because they essentially set up the do's and don'ts of classic Sonic. Since this was the first Sonic game, ever, the developers kind of experimented with a lot of different ideas. As a result, only 2 of the zones follow the do's, while the rest... Green Hill and Starlight Zone are the only levels in this entire game that I would describe as good. Green Hill has the loops, the fun momentum-based platforming, and Starlight has a lot of that as well, but even then, Starlight Zone isn't perfect, and it still has a little bit of that Sonic 1 awkward jank to it. I mainly just remember it so fondly because it acts as a palate cleanser to the blood clot of a zone that comes before it. Speaking of which, the other zones! Spring Yard is pretty middle of the road for me. It has some of the more fun momentum-based obstacles like with these half pipes, and it looks like the level designer had a field day with springs, but aside from that, it's not the most fun or fair level out there. These ramps that trick you into thinking it's safe to go fast, and these platforms at the end of Act 3 are the first that come to mind. These last 3 remaining zones though, are pain. No fun, no breaks, just ass. And I hate ass! And you know, that's probably not a good sign considering that it's half of the game. We've already mentioned Marble Zone, which already seems bad as it is. But then Labyrinth Zone says, okay, let's take everything not fun about Marble Zone and then let's just expand upon it. Like, why the f not? Labyrinth Zone is like if you took the slow, clunky nature of Marble Zone and then combined it with the anxiety of a water level. Everyone's like, oh man, Ocarina of Time Water Temple, it's the worst water level in history. But you played Labyrinth Zone? Oh, but the water and the graphics, they look so nice displayed on a CRT. They do, but that's not enough to save this forsaken underwater ruin. Why do you think they call it ruins? Because they ruined the game! The only remotely cool part about this entire zone is the water slide at the beginning of Act 3. The rest of the time, though? Try not to get hit and lose all of your rings during the slow, monotonous to control underwater sections, or else the game will chug. Not to mention that the boss during the 3rd act is probably the worst one in the whole game. The rest of them here are fine. Spring Yards can be a bit annoying, and I think the one for Starlight is pretty cool, but this one has a special place in the dark corner of my heart. Not only can you just get left behind here if you don't have the reflexes of a supersonic hedgehog, but the boss itself is a stressful climb up this pathway while you're trying to avoid traps and outrun water. You're not even supposed to attack Eggman here, which is extremely misleading since they let you get a pot shot off of him at the start. My best advice here is to move quickly so you can get as much done before the water comes as possible, but while also not going so fast that you run head-on into traps. Look before you leap and keep a cool head, and by the time the water ever reaches you, you'll be right near the end of the tunnel. Oh, and while we're at it, let's just throw in an extra active labyrinth zone right at the tail end of Scrap Brain as a last hurrah of the player's sanity. It's so fun. I love this game. When this act starts, do yourself a favor and go underneath this moving platform here to take a shortcut. It'll save you both time and a headache. And on the topic of Scrap Brain, I get that this is supposed to be the final zone of the game. Okay, well, the actual last final zone. But that doesn't mean you have to strip the zone of fun as well. There are so many unfair traps here, and things that can insta-kill or overwhelm you is ridiculous. Final zone, destroy the boss, beat Eggman, you save the rabbits. Good job, game over. When it's done right, it's a really fun time. Unfortunately, I can only unapologetically say that about a third of this game is truly fun, and you have to get through some pretty rough portions to play through half of the good stuff, which is why I would recommend playing literally any of the other classic games first. The game unfortunately peaks at Green Hill, but the game did what it needed to. It established Sonic as a gaming icon and mascot to rival Mario, and established some of the basics for how to make a Sonic game truly fun. You're almost never gonna nail something on your first try, and it's okay to give it another shot in the hopes of improving it. Even then, the next attempt is still gonna have its fair share of problems. Sonic 2. A lot of people like to call this game the best in the classic Sonic trilogy, which I can totally understand if you're only looking at the first half of the game. Better stages that more closely follow the core design of Sonic 1 Green Hill, the spin dash which lets you get a boost of speed, a fox who can bop on the enemies. Better pacing thanks to each zone only being 2 acts instead of 3, and even a 2-player mode, look at that. Hey Bert, wanna play Sonic 2?
You sicken me.
And you know what? The music's kind of a jam too. The first game had some good music as well, but Masato Nakamura came back to compose the soundtrack for the sequel, and does a bang-up job. It might also just be my personal bias because I absolutely love the sound of Sega Genesis chiptune. It's probably my favorite type of chiptune. It just has this iconic twang to it, all thanks to the Sega Genesis sound chip. I'm a sucker for it. We're getting off track though. Gameplay, yeah, that's what we're doing. Sonic 2 takes everything fun about the first level in Sonic 1 and builds off of that to make an extremely fun speed and momentum-based platformer. For the first half of the game,
I have never once visited an oil ocean, but I now know I will never.
Emerald Hill is like the cooler Green Hill. They stole its clothes but wore it better. You've got loops, ramps, these fun twisty boys, and you know what? I've said it once, but I'll say it again. These waterfalls look really nice in the CRT, along with the rest of the level. Then you get to Chemical Plant, and on top of having a really cool aesthetic to this zone, it looks at the speed sections from Emerald Hill and goes, oh, wow, that's cute. It has more tough platforming compared to Zone 1, I'm sure everyone sees these blocks in their nightmares, but you're rewarded with even better speed and momentum as a result. It keeps a balance regardless of difficulty. But then you roll up to Zone 3 and you're like, it's a water level, but it's not just a water level, it's a water level. It's a water level, but it's not just a water level, a good one? If you platform well enough, you can just stay out of the water. Even if you do fall in though, you aren't stripped of your speed and they still give you the room to travel around a bit faster. It's a Sonic water level done right. Although I also thought I'd add in that there's some weird parallax scrolling with this foliage here, and while it's not as noticeable playing on a CRT, it does still look a bit off. Regardless, they broke the ruin curse because it did not, in fact, ruin the game. We'll be giving that award to a couple other contestants later though. Casino Night, you ever wanted to turn Sonic into pinball? You ever wanted to turn Sonic into good pinball? This is probably Sonic 2's most iconic stage next to Chemical Plant, and I mean, it's not hard to tell why. This zone probably has the most unique aesthetic out of all of them, being a Vegas-inspired casino stage, combining pinball physics and a slot machine minigame to make a really standout zone. Essentially, it's Sonic meets gambling! Cletus, I thought you died.
One cannot simply kill God.
Oh my god, Sega, you finally did it! They finally added Hill Zone! Not too much to say for this one. It has more of a focus on verticality, it reuses the seesaws from Starlight Zone, there's a volcano chase sequence, that's pretty cool. But then, can we talk about Mystic Cave for a second? The visuals look fantastic here, and this funky as shit music, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about when I say that I love Genesis chiptune. It's just... But that's it. That's it. That's where the fun ends. We're done now. It's crazy to me how good the beginning of this game is. How it does everything right as a sequel, but then throws all of that out the window when you get here. I really wanted to emphasize just how fun the beginning of this game was, because Sonic 2 was gunning it to the end zone this entire time, but then fumbled the catch at the end.
How's that for a sport ball reference?
Oil Lotion is tolerable at best, and these seahorse enemies give me an aneurysm, and then they follow that up with some of the biggest video game whiplash I think I've ever gotten. You get through Act 1 and 2, but then...
What in the I didn't think it was possible. You, Sonic 2. F you.
Ketchup.
Metropolis Zone is not only 3 acts long, but it also has some of the worst Sonic level design out of anything we've seen so far. It brings back the jank of Sonic 1 and laughs in your face with it, which, to be fair, has been present even in the good zones we already talked about, but not at the level it is here. Bullshit enemy placement, traps you'd never see coming, and to make it worse, my screen is starting to get wavy. Let me try and fix this real quick, and... God damn it, Kevin, what are you doing back there?
Look what you did, you little jerk!
Guess it's time to put her down. Okay, so through the power of totally legitimate and fair means, I'm unfortunately back at Metropolis Zone. We beat it and then move on to Sky Chase, which is a slow and weird to control auto-scrolling section. That should tell you everything you need to know. Then we head over to Wing Fortress. Okay, so apparently that wasn't a cutscene. Awesome. Then we head over to Wing Fortress, where we'll have to suffer through the last traditional zone of the game. I don't know how they did it, but they made something worse than Metropolis Zone. Anxiety-inducing platforming over instant death pits, boost pads that send you flying off the edge if you don't stand perfectly still the second you hit them, and these damn chickens who shoot their offspring at you. I hope you go infertile. Oh, but it's fine, because we have the final boss up next. We're almost done, except we're not, because beating it is a Herculean task within itself. Beating Metal Sonic Mark 1 over here isn't super tough once you learn the pattern for beating it, but good luck learning that without any game overs. And then, right when you think you're safe, you've got this lummox over here ready to ruin your day. My advice if you're trying to play it safe is to wait until he flies into the air and slams back down, attack the Death Egg robot one time, then run as far away as possible so it can't hit you afterwards. Rinse and repeat for a couple minutes until it's dead. It might be tedious, but it'll do the job. It wouldn't be so bad if they at least gave you rings, but you have to do both fights back to back without taking any damage. And that means you can't use Supersonic during this part of the game either. Which reminds me, collecting all of the Chaos Emeralds in this game rewards you with this overpowered beast called Supersonic, which means that collecting them all is actually worth a damn this time around. If it wasn't hell to do, that is. Collecting 50 rings and rolling up to one of these sparkly circles accesses the special stages this time around, and while the first couple are tough, they're still doable. Unfortunately, Miles here makes the rest of them nearly impossible. Normally, Tails serves to assist the player, attacking enemies, collecting rings, breaking a platform. I was planning on using that, Tails! But here, he will constantly run into these landmines and drain your ring count until you have nothing left. The only way you'd be able to even have a chance at beating these is by memorizing the level layout so that you can move out of the way before Tails has a chance to hit anything. And I'm not doing that. It is remarkable how this game goes from being fantastic to annoying to absolute hell if you're going for 100%. Sonic 1 might have had its fair share of issues, but it surprisingly never pissed me off as much as the ending half of this game does. I just need to let my anger out on something. I need to let all of this energy out before we keep going with this. And it's gotta be something new. I've hit games with frying pans before, I've buried them, I've ranted about them, but this time it has to be different. It has to be.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Brendan Drewdan Show!
one of those days.
Welcome everyone, we've got a great show for you tonight. Lots of great guests lined up, lots of fun activities planned to hand out some Pop-Its in the crowd for the kids, just so they can play around with them during the show. We're open for only 2 casualties this time. We even have our own one-man band back here, Jazzy Jammy! Let's give a round of applause for Jammy. Jammy, play us a solo. That's such a good one, Sam. You're such a funny guy. Alright, before we get really started though, I'd like everyone to rise for the National Drewdan. So beautiful.
Hey man, this seat says reserved.
Yeah, for our first guest, who just so happens to be... Who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be? No one knows. Who's it gonna be? It's what the f***? What the Pock?
Bro, I thought you were supposed to be running a talk show. I don't see anyone here. Your ratings are gonna go down.
That's because you aren't looking inward, Danimal. So, Pock, you've been in the world for a while now, so why don't you tell us a little bit about ourselves, self.
Yeah, I am a competitive Splatoon player who just came out of retirement and made a
I'll have
team,
two number 9,
which I'm really excited
number 9,
about. I mainly play this
number
sport,
6 with extra
and
dip,
I also have 2
number
dogs,
7,
and I love them very, very much.
Yeah, so Pock, we all know you're like a big fan of Splatoon, but according to my notes here, you're like a big fan of
Classic Sonic
as well, right?
Classic Sonic? Oh, well, I haven't actually played those before.
Wait, you haven't?
No, not at all.
What the f*** was that, man?
That was the sound of our guest leaving, Danimal.
Oh. Well, look out for the shrapnel.
What shrapnel? Holy shit, Sonic 3. Sonic 3! Well, this game was originally going to be the series' first attempt at 3D in air quotes, it was eventually settled on being another 2D title, and the developers wanted to make it the greatest and most ambitious Sonic game yet. Hell, one of the most ambitious Sega Genesis games in general. Unfortunately, this ambition would result in the game being split into 2 parts in order to meet deadlines, leading to Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles. There's something special about these 2 game cartridges though, because it wasn't just like, oh yeah, you just put in one and then you put in the other. No, these babies could be one and the same. Using the power of a lock-on technology, you could combine both games to make one seamless experience. And there's something especially cool about doing it with the actual cartridges. There are digital versions out there with these games both separated and together, but it doesn't compare to how cool it is just flipping open the flap on the top of Sonic and Knuckles and then slapping the other guy in. It's like video game intercourse. And so no, my voice is going, oh my god. And so Sonic 3 and Knuckles was born. Hey Brendan, which one's better? Sonic 3 or Sonic and Knuckles?
Doesn't matter, Uncle Ben. Sonic 3 and Knuckles is better than both of them.
If Sonic 2 refined what was in Sonic 1, then Sonic 3 and Knuckles was polishing up everything done right in Sonic 2. The game isn't perfect, but it's as close as you're gonna get to with this entire trilogy of games. And you know that's the case when they finally added in a save feature. It's sad that it took them this long, but let's just be thankful it's here. Except for Sonic and Knuckles, they forgot about that one. Right off the bat, you can tell that the presentation of this game got bumped up a lot. We've actually got a story and cutscenes this time. In the past 2, it was just kinda, oh my god, he stole all the ferrets! But now we've got more fleshed out characters, like with Nux over here. We've got goals we're working towards. Hell, even the zones tell a story. You beat Carnival Night Zone, get launched out of a cannon, and then land on a snowboard starting off Ice Cap Zone. That's sick. Hell, halfway through Act 1 of Angel Island, Eggman just decides to torch the place, and it's on fire throughout the rest of your time in the zone. Sonic, you gonna do something about that, or you're just gonna stand there looking like a jackass? 3 acres of land is what I've let get burned down so far. Actually playing these games together as a single package is a fantastic experience, and the most fun I've had with the classic Sonic trilogy so far. It's the best out of all of these games, no contest. It has the most interesting and fun opening zone yet. The water level somehow ended up being my favorite stage. They made Wing Fortress but better, and it even made me tolerate Marble for once.
Finally, I can appreciate it.
Each of the zones introduce and explore different ways of shaking up the gameplay while also keeping speed and momentum in mind. Most of the time, but I'll get to that in a sec. We've got these funky Beyblades and speed switches in Marble Garden, the ice platforms in Ice Cap, these tunnels and propellers and Flying Battery, bouncy mushrooms, zip lines, anti-gravity mechanics. They play around with a lot of fun stuff here. Oh, and let me not forget the barrel from Carnival Night. It's so fun. It's such a fun time. You ever hear about this f***ing barrel? Cause let me tell you something. I want to see it in a ditch on the side of the road. The power-ups you collect also help in shaking up the gameplay a lot too. In Sonic 1 and 2, you'd have these shield power-ups that just kind of give Sonic an extra hit when he takes damage, no more than that. But now, on top of that, you also have these elemental abilities layered onto it. An electric shield that lets you get a double jump and attract rings towards you. A fire shield which gives you complete immunity to fire hazards and this extra little boost. And the bubble which lets you be immune to drowning, as well as bounce up and down Sonic Adventure style. And the music you listen to while playing in these zones, oh my god, it's so good! Masato Nakamura unfortunately wouldn't come back to compose the soundtrack for these 2 games, so for Sonic 3 they would instead get... no shot. Sonic likes to shampoo his enemies! I won't go into this too much since it's an entire rabbit hole, but to put it short and sweet, yes, Michael f***ing Jackson worked on some of the soundtrack for Sonic 3. It used to be somewhat of a gaming tall tale, but it was outright confirmed by Yuji Naka last year that it was actually true. Stepping away from MJ, and back to the game though, you can just outright play through the game as either Knuckles or Tails if you wanted to, which adds a whole other layer of replayability. And is that more multiplayer I see? Bird!
No!
There's also just this layer of interconnectivity between the 2 parts now that brings the whole experience together. Like, remember the Slummix from Marble Garden? Well, guess what? The chump's back in Lava Reef, still running amok and causing chaos. Or the short cutscene at the end of Angel Island Zone, where Sonic has to outrun the bombardment from Eggman's airship. Well, in the second half of the game, you finally get to take the fight to Eggman and play through 2 acts on that very same airship. And the progress you have towards 100% carries over from one game to the other as well. Speaking of which, it looks like they fixed 100% completion in this game. Instead of grinding for 50 rings and trying to make it to the end of the stage or to a checkpoint, all you have to do is find one of these giant rings hiding around the different stages and jump on inside. Move around this pseudo 3D plane, hit all of the blue spheres, dodge the red ones, maybe go for the rings if you're feeling a little bit frisky, and BAM! You've got yourself a Chaos Emerald. Find enough of these bad boys and you'll not only be able to transform into Supersonic, but during the later half of the game, you might even be able to transform into Hypersonic. And the best part is they actually let you use it on the final boss this time around. Normally, I think this boss is a little bit annoying without it, because if you screw up and die once, then you have to go through it hitless without any rings, but if you have Supersonic, you actually get an entire unique fight. Plus, finding these rings is just fun in themselves. Sonic stages already have elements of exploration with multiple paths in each level, and now you've got to keep your eye out for these rings as well. You might notice a strange looking rock, or decide to go off the beaten path, and hey, would you look at that? Finding these rings, and subsequently the emeralds, are actually in line with the core gameplay for once. No more grinding for rings, or playing the game in a way that most people wouldn't. If you're playing the game and you notice something amiss, then you're bound to run into one of these naturally. As a complete package, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is a really good game. But a lot of the problems arise when you look at these games individually. You get to Launch Base Zone in Sonic 3 and while it's a fine zone, the game just kind of ends abruptly. It makes you feel like, that's it? No smash? And while Mushroom Hill from the beginning of Sonic and Knuckles is really good, it doesn't exactly feel like a first zone, and that's because it isn't. It's supposed to be the halfway point of the game. Sonic and Knuckles is also just the weaker game overall in my opinion when looking at them separately. It definitely has some cool moments like Eggman betraying Knuckles and the climb up to Sky Sanctuary in order to make it onto the Death Egg, but the zones just don't feel as fun comparatively. I love Flying Battery, but even I can't deny that there are some portions, especially in Act 2, that just feel unnecessarily slow. Sandopolis is a slow maze in Act 2, and to make it worse, I accidentally took an emergency shit in an urn thinking it was just a pot, and now I have the undead on my ass, quite literally. But hey, as an added bonus of playing things the way God intended, we can slap any game of our choosing, except for Shaq Fu, they don't like that one, on top of Sonic and Knuckles, and we're able to play some more Blue Sphere. Or hell, put Sonic 2 on top of it, and we have Knuckles and Sonic 2. That's really damn cool. It gives you a whole new way of playing the older game, just for honing the new one. And now, after all this time, we're finally finished with talking about all of the classic Sonic games on Genesis. The mainline ones at least. Like I mentioned earlier, Sonic at this time was a phenomenon, and the games were crazy popular on top of that, which made spin-offs an inevitability. Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. What, you mean like a can opener?
Take this!
This game is just a reskin of Puyo Puyo, which if you don't know, is just a falling block puzzle game in the same vein as Tetris. Match up 4 of these goopy boys of the same color to clog up your opponent's side with balls, while also trying not to reach the top of the screen. Fun fact, this was actually the first game that I ever owned on the Sega Genesis, and I played the shit out of it. It took me a bit of time to learn since I'd never played Puyo Puyo before, but it got addicting once I got the hang of things. Figuring out how to align the different flubbers in a way that lets you set up combos for future moves is so satisfying. And when you nail a combo and the little guys let out a... that's the moment every gamer dreams of. And things can get pretty tough too. I'm playing through it, having a fun, grand old time, and then f***ing Patrick rolls up to ruin my day. I cannot for the life of me beat this mobile wad of ham. I just can't. I can't do it. As soon as I start even getting close to having the upper hand, bam, no room to breathe. What's my name? You know what, let's just move on and take a look at the other spin-off. When you look at Sonic's design with a spin-off game in mind, one of the first ideas that you think of is probably a pinball game. I mean, you already have this character based around speed and momentum who can curl up into a ball. He's the perfect candidate. Welcome to Sonic Spinball, bitches. As a pinball game, it's pretty fun, but if you're aiming to actually play through the whole thing and beat it, it's a fun time waster. If you have like 15 minutes to kill or you just want to try shooting for a high score, it'll definitely scratch that itch. It's just that actually completing these levels are...
How do you say a bitch? To play that is, they're a bitch to play.
I haven't played too many other pinball games, but comparing it to the ones I have played, I think that the game expects the player to do way too much, while also expecting them to do it all pretty much perfectly. Take Kirby's Pinball Land on the Game Boy. The game, believe it or not, can be pretty tough as well if you're looking to beat it, but your only goal is just to make it from the bottom of the board and beat the boss up at the top. And even if you fall, it gives you plenty of chances to zoom right back on up towards the top. Here's how the first level of Sonic Spinball goes, though. Okay, so you've got to fling yourself up here, hit these 2 switches. Those switches open up the garbage cans and then let you into the next section. In this next section, you have to pull a lever, remove these 3 barrels, and open a hatch at the top by bopping on these guys 3 times. After that, you'll be taken to a minecart section, which allows you to grab one of the emeralds, which there are 3 of in the stage, and all of them are blue for some reason. If you want the emerald on the other side, though, you have to do all of that stuff again, but for the board on the right side of the level. And then apparently you're supposed to just know that you can just drive this barrel like a raft over to the emerald in the middle. Also, there's apparently a boss after all of that, which you have to beat as well. Did I mention that if you die at any point during all of that, you're sent back to the start and your progress is reset? I mean, you get to keep any Chaos Emeralds you collect, but good luck even getting to that point half of the time. And I get that the point of Sonic is that he goes fast, but I feel like it's way too hard to control where Sonic is going here, and with how much is already going on in these levels, it's just too much. All it takes is glitching through one of the flippers, and wow, look at that! All of your progress is reset to 0! Turning into Gruntilda! I don't think a single person on this planet has ever gotten this upset about Sonic f***ing Spinball of all things, but I guess there's a first time for everything. I'll just stick to using it as a high score based time killer for now.
That's it. I need to let this energy out again. And we're back! But before we get back to it, I'd like to take a moment of silence for our good friend George Lucas Cardboard Cutout. Without him and his involuntary financial support, this show wouldn't be possible. Take it away.
Hey, Brendan. Pull yourself together, man. You're embarrassing yourself. Here, I found our next guest. I think they might know a bit or two about games.
Oh, okay. Welcome in, Ronnie Retro?
Yeah! Yeah! Yeah!
Who the hell is this?
Yeah!
What's up, gamers? It's me, Ronnie Retro. Gaming extraordinaire.
So what, you like to play video games or something?
No.
That's badass, dude.
Yeah, I know. Thanks for letting me out of that cell back there, by the way. That IRS agent dude's had me back there for years. I had to survive off of TV static for food and radio waves for water.
Isn't that just like a display, though?
House arrest is a bitch.
Wait, no, Bert, did you just say this guy was locked up in the back of the office? You just let this guy out?
So I heard you were going to talk about classic Sonic games on the Genesis, right? What? Don't know what to say?
No, it's just that I've never interviewed an escaped convict before.
Is gaming a crime?
You're all about playing retro games, right?
Yeah?
Then yeah.
Look, just talk about the games, wrap it up, and then go back to your cell before Kyle finds out.
Yeah, sure. Well, you've gone through all the classic Sonic games playable on a standard Sega Genesis so far. Except for one.
What? No, I haven't. The mainline games, the spin-offs, oh no, the spin-offs. Holy Sonic 3D Blast!
There's no need to yell, I'm right here. What was going on with him? It sounded like he was getting murdered in the sound booth during that take. Okay, so if you remember, Sonic 3 was originally going to be a game that used isometric 3D, which basically means 2D sprites laid out in a way that makes the game look 3D. This idea would go on to inspire Sonic 3D Blast, the last Sonic game to release on the Sega Genesis. While the last 2 spin-offs were in completely different styles compared to a normal Sonic game, what 3D Blast was aiming to be seemed a lot more in line with the core values of a traditional Sonic game, just now in a 3D style. is what you would think. Sonic 3D Blast isn't a game about speed and momentum-based platforming. No, it's about running around a map looking for birds. And the art style, while impressive for something running on a Sega Genesis in some cases, hasn't aged the best, some of the character models at least. Tails looks like he should be in an episode of Gumby, not running on a Sega Genesis. Eggman, you doing alright there, buddy?
They thought they could ban me from the pet store for eating the birds, but I found my way back, bitch.
So now we've got to bust up all of these robots to free the birds and then bring them to these giant rings in order to complete a level. This game isn't the worst thing I've ever played, but there are a lot of reasons why I'd prefer to play pretty much anything else out of what we've discussed today. The first thing is that the general gameplay loop just isn't very fun or interesting. You wander around the level aimlessly looking for enemies with not too much interesting going on in between doing that. Sonic feels oddly slippery to control, and landing precise jumps feels way more annoying than it should, which makes me grateful that there aren't really any required platforming sections in this game, which just sounds weird for a Sonic game like this. There's basically no focus on platforming, and there are only occasional speed sections sprinkled in here and there throughout levels. You can still run decently fast, but I tend to not, since you might end up running into something just off screen, which you wouldn't have time to react to at that speed. As for the zones, there isn't really anything super interesting going on theming-wise. You've got your Green Hill, your Spring theme zone, your Eggman Mechanical Factory looking zone, Volcano Valley looks like f***ing Meatloaf. That's all I've got to say about that. There are some different obstacles and mechanics depending on the zone you're playing, but there's nothing really stand out about the whole experience. The game isn't fun, but it also isn't bad. It's the most average 5 out of 10 Meg game experience I think I've had. I'm honestly struggling to think of things to say because outside of the graphics, it just isn't very interesting. It just looks like they were hoping that the gimmick of quote-unquote 3D would be enough to sell it, but even then, other games have been doing pseudo 3D like this for years now. What do you have that the other guys don't?
Well, I've got Sonic, and I've got Speed, and I've got pseudo 3D graphics.
Bitch, Mario RPG did it first, get back in line! But hey, I actually completed this game 100%. Whoopee. I got through all of the trippy special stages with backgrounds that looked like a face melting off, and it wasn't too hard to do it. They're basically like the special stages from Sonic 2 if they weren't anxiety-inducing. What do you get for getting them all? Maybe we'll get to play Super Sonic in 3D! No, it's just a really annoying secret final boss. Okay, I'm done with this. I don't care if this game hitting me on the head gave me the idea for a discussion today. I can't do this anymore, man. I don't want the birds to be free. I want Eggman to torch the island again. Can we go back to that? More acres, please. And with that, we did it. We looked through Sonic's entire library of games playable on original Sega Genesis. It had its high points, its low points, its 3D blast points, but overall, I had fun. Even with stuff like the low points in Sonic 1 and 2, I still had a fun time because these games at their core have good and fun ideas. Fun fact, which will probably remove all of my credibility towards this franchise from now on, but Sonic 1 is actually my favorite to play out of all of the classic Sonic trilogy. Is it the weakest? Oh, hell yeah, but it's also the shortest, so by now I've grown used to its jank and I can blast through it in about an hour if I'm looking to scratch that classic Sonic itch. Except for Sonic Mania. If we're counting that, it beats out any of these by a long shot. And playing all of these on original hardware like this will never not be cool to me. I don't care how many times I have to readjust my screen or reload the game because it freezes. I will always prefer playing these games in this way, given the opportunity. Looking at these games, we can see that nailing something truly good, fun, or unique takes time. You'll almost never get something right from the get-go, and it's okay to try again and again until you reach a point you're more comfortable with. Even when you finally reach a point you're happy with, there's always room for improvement as well, so there's no harm in trying to shake things up or build off of and improve what you have. I'm probably getting way too philosophical for Sonic the f***ing Hedgehog. But hey, who knows? Maybe I can look at Sonic's future lineup of games for inspiration as well. Or I could just stick to running a talk show. Let's just do that. That works a lot better. Let's that's a good idea. Let's do it.
Hey man, you got viewers calling in.
Yeah, I know. Amen.
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 Amen. Bert, I can't get through to him. You talk to him. You know what? Maybe calling something was the greatest idea. So, it's time for one of our favorite segments of the show. What if Bert was purple?
Hey, yo, what?
Purple, purple, purple.
Hey, amen, stop.
Purple,
Hey, amen,
purple,
stop. No, no, no. Hey, amen.
Our last guest, Flukiki Dongbong. DB, am I too negative?
Nah, I think we all get like that sometimes. The negative things in life tend to be more noticeable than the positives, so we have to remember to balance things out.
Bro, what if, like, sharks had legs?
That'd be f***ing terrifying, man. Count me out of living in that world.
Not as crazy as if BB had limbs, though.
I'm talking through a computer. Of course I don't have limbs to use right now.
Then why don't you ever show them?
You know damn well why. We've been over this before.
Yeah, man, I think you're taking a little bit too far. We're running a talk show here, not an FBI interrogation.
Wait, what's that supposed to mean?
You know, DB, for someone without limbs, you seem to sure know a lot about playing video games.
If you're gonna insult me and not listen to what I have to say, then I can test that theory about limbs.
What are you possibly gonna do about it?
You know what, I guess you could say that TV works out.
It is the Sonic the Hedgehog, the Blue Blue, the Style and Speedster, with the chili dogs and such. Here, like
You know what, Danimal? I think DB was onto something.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're being a little bit too harsh to him. I'm not gonna lie. Not to mention you let a prisoner loose.
Well, I tend to lose my cool when people start talking about retro games for too long. It's like pure negative energy.
Oh, come on, man. The reason I wanted to talk about these classic games in the first place is because I love them. Yeah, they've got their problems, but for games as old as these, they hold up really well, the mainline ones at least. Even Sonic 1, which is probably the most poorly aged out of all the ones I talked about today, somehow manages to be my favorite because I just personally find it the most fun to blast through and play for a couple hours. Not to mention being able to play through all of these games on original hardware with a CRT TV was probably one of the coolest experiences I've had with playing any video game before. I might not have grown up with these titles or have a lot of nostalgia for them like I do with something like SA2, but that doesn't stop me from respecting them for what they were and for what they are now. Just really solid, fun, and fast-paced 2D platformers that scratch a gaming itch like nothing else I've ever played before.
Look, man, if you're happy, I'm happy. I just don't know if I can put on this co-host persona anymore and listen to you talk about them. It makes me want to puke my brains out.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate it. Your tolerance for these older games seems to be getting a lot better.
Yeah, I try not to think about it. Hey, at least you got all the information out before the end card.
The end card?
Is this you? Is this you?